Pipeline Studio is about understanding your workflow and knowing when it's running smoothly. Before we talk about techniques, tools, or platforms, we need to establish a shared baseline. This channel is about creative pipelines, but that phrase is often misunderstood, so we're going to define it carefully and without shortcuts. A creative pipeline is not a checklist, it's not a productivity system, and it's not a shortcut to better results. A creative pipeline is simply the path your work travels, from the moment an idea appears to the moment that work is considered finished. Every creative person already has a pipeline. The difference is whether that pipeline is intentional or accidental. For many people, creative work begins wherever inspiration happens to strike. An idea shows up. Work begins immediately. Decisions are made as needed, in the moment, without much structure. Sometimes that works. But as projects become larger, more frequent, or more demanding, that approach starts to break down. When a pipeline is unclear, creative work feels unstable. You don't know what step you're on, you don't know what you should be doing right now, and you don't know when it's reasonable to stop and move forward. This uncertainty creates friction, not because the work itself is difficult, but because the process is undefined. A pipeline exists to remove that friction. At its most basic level, a pipeline answers four simple questions. Where does an idea begin? What happens to it next? What happens after that? And how do you know when the work is done? That's the entire concept. Notice what's missing. There's no mention of quality, no mention of speed, no mention of optimization, growth, or success. Those concerns come later. Right now, the goal is clarity. For example, an idea might begin as a short note written down quickly. That note becomes a rough outline. The outline becomes a first draft. The draft becomes a revision, and the revision becomes a finished piece. That sequence, even if it feels obvious, is a pipeline. Most people never stop to name these steps. They move through them intuitively, which works for a while, but intuition doesn't scale. As workload increases, intuition turns into hesitation and second guessing. This is why pipelines matter more as creative work becomes serious. A pipeline does not tell you what to create. It tells you how work moves, regardless of the project. Two people can use the same tools, the same software, even the same ideas, and still get very different results because their pipelines are different. One pipeline creates momentum. Another creates confusion. In Pipeline Studio, we're not going to optimize anything yet. We're not going to speed things up. And we're not going to chase efficiency. First, we're going to make the pipeline visible. Because once you can see the system your work moves through, you can reason about it, you can adjust it deliberately, and you can improve it without guessing. That visibility is the foundation everything else in this series is built on. Another reason pipelines matter is that they create distance between you and the outcome of your work. That distance is healthy. Without a pipeline, every piece of work feels personal. Every rough idea feels like a judgment. Every unfinished project feels like a failure. A pipeline changes that relationship. When work moves through defined stages, you stop asking, "Is this good?" at every step. Instead, you ask, "Is this ready to move forward?" That shift matters. It allows ideas to be incomplete without being wrong. It allows drafts to exist without needing to justify themselves. And it allows creative momentum to continue, even when confidence fluctuates. Pipelines also create containment. They give unfinished work a place to live without demanding constant attention. They allow you to pause without losing progress. And they make it possible to return to work without starting over. This is why experienced creatives often appear calm under pressure. They are not calmer because they care less. They are calmer because their process is doing the work of holding uncertainty for them. Decisions have a place to happen. Mistakes have a place to be corrected. And completion has a definition. When those things exist, creative energy stops leaking. Over time, this builds trust in your own system. You stop relying on motivation. You stop waiting for clarity to arrive on its own. And you stop forcing work to move before it's ready. Instead, you guide it through the pipeline. This does not make creativity mechanical. It makes creativity sustainable. And sustainability is what allows creative work to exist over the long term without burning you out. This is why we start here, not with tools, not with platforms, but with structure. In the next lesson, we'll begin identifying the actual stages of a pipeline, starting with where ideas really enter the system and why that entry point shapes everything that follows. This concludes this session. Let what you've heard settle before continuing.